The coup d'etat in Myanmar in early 2021 was a significant event in the history of the country and sparked concerns on human rights all across the world. Hello and welcome to UPSC PolityView. Today, let's learn about the 2021 Myanmar coup d'etat. A coup d'etat in Myanmar began on the morning of 1st February 2021 when democratically elected members of the country's ruling party, the National League for Democracy (NLD), were deposed by the Tatmadaw, Myanmar's military, which then vested power in the stratocracy. Acting President Myint Swe proclaimed a year-long state of emergency and declared power had been transferred to Commander-in-Chief of Defense Services Min Aung Hlaing. It declared the results of the November 2020 general election invalid and stated its intent to hold a new election at the end of the state of emergency. The coup d'etat occurred the day before the Parliament of Myanmar was due to swear in the members elected at the 2020 election, thereby preventing this from occurring. President Myint and State Counsellor Aung Hla were detained, along with ministers, their deputies and members of the parliament. On 3rd February 2021, Myint was charged with breaching campaign guidelines and COVID-19 pandemic restrictions under Section 25 of the Natural Disaster Management Law. Aung San Suu Kyi was charged with breaching emergency COVID-19 laws and for illegally importing and using radio and communication devices, specifically 6 ICOM devices from her security team and a walkie-talkie, which are restricted in Myanmar and needs clearance from military-related agencies before acquisition. Both were remanded in custody for 2 weeks. Aung San Suu Kyi received an additional criminal charge for violating the National Disaster Act on 16 February, 2 additional charges for violating communications laws and an intent to incite public unrest on 1st March and another of violating the Official Secrets Act on 1st April. As of 12th April 2021, at least 707 civilians, including children, have been killed by military or police forces and at least 3,070 people detained. 3 prominent NLD members also died while in police custody in March 2021. Let's learn about the background of the Myanmar coup d'etat. Myanmar, also known as Burma, has been beset with political instability since it was granted independence from Britain in January 1948. Between 1958 and 1960, the military formed a temporary caretaker government at the behest of the UNU, the country's democratically elected prime minister, to resolve political fighting. The military voluntarily restored civilian government after holding the 1960 Burmese general election. Less than 2 years later, the military seized power in the 1962 coup, which under the leadership of Ne Win precipitated 26 years of military rule. In 1988, nationwide protests broke out in the country. Dubbed the 8888 Uprising, the civil unrest was sparked by economic mismanagement, leading Ne Win to step down. In September 1988, the military's top leaders formed the State Law and Order Restoration Council, SLORC, which then seized power. Aung San Suu Kyi, the daughter of the country's modern founder Aung San, became a notable pro-democracy activist during this period. In 1990, free elections were allowed by the military under the assumption that the military enjoyed popular support. Ultimately, the elections resulted in a landslide victory for Aung San Suu Kyi's party, the National League for Democracy. However, the military refused to cede power and placed her under house arrest. The military remained in power for another 22 years until 2011, following the military's roadmap to democracy, during which the 2008 Constitution of Myanmar was drafted. Between 2011 and 2015, a tentative democratic transition began, and elections held in 2015 resulted in a victory for Aung San Suu Kyi's party, the National League for Democracy, or NLD. However, the military retained substantial power, including the right to appoint 1/4 of all parliament members. The 2021 coup occurred in the aftermath of the general election on 8 November 2020, in which the NLD won 396 out of 476 seats in parliament, an even larger margin of victory than in the 2015 election. The military's proxy party, the Union Solidarity and Development Party, won only 33 seats. The army disputed the results, claiming that the vote was fraudulent. The coup attempt had been rumored for several days, prompting statements of concern from Western nations such as the United Kingdom, France, the United States, and Australia. Let's learn about the unfolding of the coup. On February 1, 2021, NLD spokesman Myint said that Aung San Suu Kyi, Myint, Myint, and other party leaders had been taken in an early morning raid. Myint added that he expected to be also detained shortly. Numerous communication channels stopped working, phone lines to the capital, Naypyidaw, were interrupted. State-run MRTV said it was unable to broadcast due to technical issues, and widespread internet disruptions were reported beginning around 3 a.m. The military disrupted cellular services throughout the country, mirroring kill-switch tactics previously employed in combat zones in Chin and Rakhine states. All the member banks under the Myanmar Banking Association suspended their financial services. Around 400 elected members of parliament or MPs were placed under house arrest, confined to a government housing complex in Naypyidaw. Following the coup, the NLD arranged for the MPs to remain housed in the complex until 6 February. Social media users began calling on MPs to convene a parliamentary session within a government guest house, since the group met the constitution's quorum requirements. In response, the military issued another order giving MPs 24 hours to leave the guest house premises. On 4th February, 70 NLD MPs took an oath of office in clear defiance of the coup. During the coup, soldiers also detained several Buddhist monks who had led the 2007 Saffron Revolution, including the Mayawadi Sayadaw and Shwe Ne War Sayadaw, outspoken critics of the military. 8888 Uprising activist leaders, including Maya Awi, were also arrested. As of 4th February, the Assistance Association for Political Prisoners had identified 133 officials and lawmakers and 14 civil society activists in detention by the military as a result of the coup. Soldiers were seen in Naypyidaw and the largest city, Yangon. The military subsequently announced on military-controlled Mayawadi TV that it had taken control of the country for 1 year. A statement signed by acting President Myint Swe declared that responsibility for legislation, administration, and judiciary had been transferred to Min Hlaing. The National Defense and Security Council, chaired by acting President Myint Swe and attended by top military officers, was convened, following which a statement was issued by the military declaring that fresh elections would be held and that power would only be transferred after they had concluded. The military also announced the removal of 24 ministers and deputies, for whom 11 replacements were named. On 2nd February 2021, Min Hlaing established the State Administration Council with 11 members as the executive governing body. On 3rd February 2021, Myanmar police filed criminal charges against Aung San Suu Kyi, accusing her of violating the export and import law, for allegedly importing unlicensed communication devices used by her security detail after conducting a raid on her home in the capital. The export and import law carries a potential prison term of 3 years and a fine and was previously used in 2017 to prosecute journalists for flying a drone above the Assembly of the Union. Meanwhile, Myint was charged with violating the Natural Disaster Management Law, specifically for waving at a passing NLD convoy in September 2020, thereby violating rules against election campaigning during the COVID-19 pandemic. On 6 February 2021, Sin Turnell, the Australian economic advisor to the civilian government, was arrested. On 8 February 2021 and 9 February 2021, the military government issued orders to impose a curfew from 8 p.m. to 4 a.m. in Yangon and other major cities and restrict gatherings of 5 or more people in the public spaces. On 9 February 2021, the NLD's headquarters in Yangon was raided by Myanmar police. Myanmar military regime distributed a draft for the controversial cybersecurity law to internet service providers, asking them to provide comments by 15 February 2021. The laws were widely criticized by IT communities as it violates human rights by putting citizens under digital surveillance and severely restricting freedom of speech. News of China's involvement in building the firewall were widely circulated among Myanmar social media users, which prompts protesters to demonstrate outside the Chinese embassy. China denied the news as rumors. On 10th February, civil servants at Kaya State protested against the coup, which also included police officers stationed there when they refused orders from their superior to return to work. On 12 February, at midnight, members of Myanmar's military and police arrested government ministers, election officials, senior members of the NLD, activists, and a former general. On 13 February, a viral post online showed that the military-run Ministry of Information or MOI pressured the press not to use the words junta and regime in the media in the military's first attempt to restrict the freedom of press. The military regime issued an arrest warrant for 7 well-known activists and influencers, including Myint Swe, for using their fame to spread writing and speaking on the social media that would disturb the nation's peace process. On 15th Feb, the military deployed armored vehicles across the cities in an attempt to silence the demonstrations in the country. Thousands of protesters in different cities across Myanmar had been calling for the release of Aung Suu Kyi. On 16 February, as protests continued, Aung Suu Kyi was given a new criminal charge on allegations of violating the country's national disaster law. On 17 February, the military issued arrest warrants on 6 more celebrities for urging civil servants to join the civil disobedience movement. On 26 February 2021, the Myanmar ambassador to the UN, Kwe Mo Tun, condemned the coup by the Tatmadaw. He was sacked from his post the next day. On the same day, a Japanese freelance journalist named Yuki Kitazumi was detained by Myanmar officers at the Sancheong Township police station, but he was released hours later after Kitazumi explained that he clearly identified himself as a reporter. On 8 March, state-controlled channel Emad TV announced that the Ministry of Information revoked the licenses for 5 local media outlets: Mizima, Myanmar Now, DVB, 7 Day News, and Khit Thit Media. The announcement stated that the outlets were prohibited from publishing and broadcasting in any type of media and by using any sort of technology. On 9th March, Kwe Myint, the Burmese ambassador to the UK, was recalled after he called for release of Aung Suu Kyi. Let's learn about the motives of the coup in Myanmar. The military's motives for the coup remain unclear. Ostensibly, the military has posited that alleged voter fraud threatened national sovereignty. A few days before the coup, the civilian-appointed Union Election Commission had categorically rejected the military's claims of voter fraud, citing the lack of evidence to support the military's claims of 8.6 million irregularities in voter lists across Myanmar's 314 townships. The coup may have been driven by the military's goal to preserve its central role in Burmese politics. The Defence Services Act imposes a mandatory retirement age of 65 for the Armed Forces Commander-in-Chief. Myint Swe, the incumbent, would have been forced to retire on his 65th birthday in July 2021. Further, the Constitution empowers solely the President, in consultation with the National Defence and Security Council, with the authority to appoint Myint Hlaing's successor, which could have provided an opportunity for the civilian arm of the government to appoint a more reform-minded military officer as Commander-in-Chief. Hlaing's lack of power would have exposed him to potential prosecution and accountability for alleged war crimes during the Rohingya conflict in various international courts. Myint Swe had also hinted a potential entry into politics as a civilian after his retirement. The activist group Justice for Myanmar has also noted the significant financial and business interests of Myint Swe and his family as a potential motivating factor for the coup. Myint Swe oversees two military conglomerates, the Myanmar Economic Corporation (MEC) and Myanmar Economic Holdings Limited or MEHL, while his daughter, son and daughter-in-law have substantial business holdings in the country. A few days before the coup, the International Monetary Fund (IMF) had released $350 million of cash to the Central Bank of Myanmar as part of an emergency aid package to address the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. The funds came with no conditions and without any precedent for refunds. In response to potential concerns regarding proper use of the funds by the military regime, an IMF spokesperson stated, "It would be in the interest of the government and certainly the people of Myanmar that those funds are indeed used accordingly." The IMF did not directly address any concerns regarding the independence of the central bank given the military's appointment of Than Nhain, an ally, as governor. A lobbyist for the military junta reported that the junta would like to improve relations with the United States and distance Myanmar from China, believing Myanmar had grown too close to China under Aung San Suu Kyi. Let's learn about the geopolitical considerations. China is depicted in Western media as having hegemony over Myanmar. China and Russia vetoed a United Nations Security Council resolution condemning the coup. It is reported that China and Russia are the main suppliers of weapons to the Myanmar army. Chinese foreign direct investment in Myanmar totaled $19 billion in 2019, compared with $700 million from the EU. Russia is seen as being supportive of the junta in order to sell more arms to them. Israel has been known to supply small arms, drones, patrol boats, and spyware to Myanmar military. Israeli court issued a gag order banning Israeli arms industries to export weapons to Myanmar. Despite the ban order, Myanmar military received training and weapons from Israeli defense companies. Myanmar army officers continued their visits to Israeli arms show. Let's learn about the legal basis of the coup. The legality of the coup had been questioned by legal scholars including Melissa Crouch. The International Commission of Jurists found that by staging a coup, the military had violated Myanmar's constitution since the alleged election irregularities did not justify the declaration of a state of emergency in comport with the constitution. Further, the jurists found that the military's actions had violated the fundamental rule of law principle. The NLD had also rejected the legal basis for the military takeover. During its announcement of the coup, the military invoked Articles 417 and 418 of the 2008 Constitution as a legal basis for the military takeover. However, Article 417 of the Constitution authorizes only a sitting president to declare a state of emergency following consultation with the National Defense and Security Council (NDSC). The incumbent civilian president Myint had not voluntarily ceded his role. Instead, the state of emergency was unconstitutionally declared by Vice President Myint Swe. The declaration of a state of emergency then transfers legislative, executive, and judicial authority to the Commander-in-Chief per Article 418. Half of the NDSC's members at the time of the coup were civilians, including the President, the civilian elected second Vice President, and the Speakers of the upper and lower houses, all of whom had been arrested by the military. The military claims that the NDSC was convened, chaired by Min Aung Hlaing, to invoke Articles 417 and 418. However, this session was held in the absence of the civilian members of the NDSC, and it is unclear whether the military had the constitutional authority to reconstitute a session of the NDSC or to unilaterally declare a state of emergency through a vice president, since the constitution grants a president who at the time had not voluntarily vacated his role the sole authority to declare a state of emergency. On 23 March 2021, during a news conference in Naypyidaw, the Tatmadaw defended the reimposition of the junta and claimed that ousted national leader Aung San Suu Kyi was corrupt, tantamount to graft. No supporting evidence for these allegations was offered outside of the taped testimony of a former colleague of Kyi, Pheo Minh Thein, who has been detained by the military since the coup began. Thank you for listening to this discussion on the 2021 Myanmar coup d'etat. For more such discussions, get the UPSC Practice app from the App Store.